Good morning, everybody. Listen, I just had a morning thought that I just thought that I would share with you all. So by now, you all know that we are all reading the Epstein files, and that has been out for years, but they're finally releasing it to the public about sex trafficking of children and babies and all of the heinous, evil acts that they have done. And everybody is saying, "Oh, how could this happen?" And all of those things. But let's keep it real. Sex trafficking isn't new. It's been going around since the beginning of time, and even in this history, American history, chattel slavery history, it's been going on for well over 500 plus, maybe thousands of years. If you ever took the time to research Black history, I want you to, or haven't really tapped into out the norm of the generic things that they are talking about and what the history books have shown you, you will also know that sex trafficking and human trafficking has been going on since chattel slavery. Many of our ancestors, female and men, were not only spiritually, mentally, emotionally violated, but also sexually violated. Many of our ancestors the women, were taken as comfort servants, as they used to call them in colonial period. Colonial servants was our ancestral women who were children who were young as 8, 9, and 10 years old, who was taken from the slave cabins and taken inside of the big house and violated and forced to have children bred, raped, and maimed, and forced to produce children for the slave master to either sell or even keep it his own. In my research of studying my family, I found so many different documents over the years, and also this was a part of my healing journey of dealing with me being a survivor myself. And I found ancestors such as Venus Ford. Venus Ford was a beautiful African American woman. She was a mulatto who was a part of the Washington family. It was said that her Augustus Washington, the brother of George Washington, was her father, and she was enslaved on the Bushrod. Well, it was called Bushrod Plantation, and she was known as the house servant for Hannah Bushrod Washington. And she was accounted for being raped as young as 10 years old. Her first child was named Betty. She had her 11 years old. And her second child was named Wes Ford. And she had him at 14 years old. She had him by our President of the United States, who was the first president. Even though Mount Vernon Estates, as many times in the American views, have hid her story for many years, but Wes Ford, who was the founder of Gum Springs community in Virginia, also was the body servant of George Washington until he passed, and also the housekeeper of Mount Vernon Estates. His mother and his grandmother, her name was Jenny, was trafficked along the years. Wes Ford was taken away from her, but Betty was forced to stay and also stay behind with her mother, but also be a comfort servant as well. Also, other ancestors I have found along the way was Emily and Mary Edmondson. Now, I'm still doing my research on Emily and Mary Edmondson and our connection and the deep connection that we have. But they was once enslaved ancestors who was also enslaved with my ancestor. Her name was Ellen Stewart. And they tried to escape on the schooner called the Pearl. Once their escape route was deterred and they was failed, and they was taken back from other slave catchers and their slave masters, they was forced to be sold down to Louisiana as fancy girls. For some of you all who do not know the meaning of fancy girls was a term used for light-skinned African and indigenous young girls who were sold down south as prostitutes and sex workers, sex slaves. Those are just two ancestors that I have found those are just four ancestors that I have found in this search and this journey of finding my ancestors. I want you to think about how many ancestors that you have who, like I said, who was violated, who had their children taken from them. How many of our ancestral babies was taken from the mothers and fed to alligators, and not only fed to alligators, but also was fed to slave masters. Yes, some of our ancestors was fed to slave masters. Have you ever heard of not only them hanging and lynching, but after they hanging and lynching and burning and barbecuing? That's what the term barbecuing actually comes from. When they will burn and char our ancestors, and they will dissect us and cut our ancestors up, and they will feed and eat off of our ancestors. If you don't believe me, you can look it up. There's plenty of books who talks about how the delectables of the darkies. Look that book up, you can find it. Sex trafficking has been around for the beginning of time. In honesty, it is the Western culture way, if you ask me. It was passed down from not only generations to generations to generations, but also centuries and centuries. Not only was women sex trafficked, but also men was too. That was called buck breaking. When the slave master, or even the slave trade, the men in the slave trade, they would rape our ancestral men in front of the women and children. And they would do god awful things to them in order to break the spirit. I continue to tell you all, and as a sex crime survivor myself, that sex crimes, sex trafficking, rape is the assassination of the soul. Many don't come back from. Many of us were bred into generations where our mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, great-great-grandmothers, and four grandmothers was given a hand of being violated, and some of them was able to keep their babies, most were not. And we would pass down that trauma in generations. And many of us have generational traumas behind that. I wanted to make this post because I wanted to tell you that sex trafficking is nothing new. It's been done by the white elites for many years, and even passed down to our ancestors, where it became a normal thing, and some of our ancestors where the victims became predators because they was taught to be predators. You know the saying, how hurt people hurt people? That's what happened. So when you think of saying, oh, this is something new, I've never heard of this before. No. It's Black History Month. We've heard of it before. We've all known it. If you don't want to crack over the books, I encourage you to sit down with an elder inside of your family. Sit down with the elderly woman and talk to her and listen to her. And she can tell you about the many generations that we have experienced. The many, not only generations, but centuries of our ancestors being violated. And then take it on to what is going on today. Not just the Epstein files, right? Also take a look at what is going on with immigration and what ICE is doing inside of those camps. Just a thought I thought I'd leave you with.